We're all guided by these invisible forces, these powerful psychological triggers that shape our feelings and our habits every single day. And most of the time, we don't even notice it's happening. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on one of the biggest ones, classical conditioning. Have you ever felt that? You hear a song on the radio and bam, you're instantly transported back to a specific summer. Or a certain smell, like rain on hot asphalt, just hits you with a wave of nostalgia. What is going on there? What's that hidden connection?
Well, it's not magic, even though it feels like it. It's actually a super fundamental way we learn called classical conditioning. At its core, it's all about learning through simple association. And, believe it or not, the story of how we figured this out started as a complete and total accident.
So our story doesn't start in some fancy psychology department. Nope. It starts in a lab with a physiologist who was studying something that sounds, well, kind of boring. He wasn't trying to unlock the secrets of the mind. He was just trying to figure out how dogs digest food.
That physiologist was the one and only Ivan Pavlov, and back in the early 1900s, he was deep in his research on doggy digestion when he started noticing something weird. Something that had absolutely nothing to do with the food itself.
This was the big aha moment. The dogs weren't just drooling when they saw the food. They started drooling when they heard the footsteps of the person who brought the food. Their bodies were literally getting ready for a meal that wasn't even there yet. Pavlov was fascinated. He called these psychic secretions, and his curiosity just completely took over.
So Pavlov basically dropped what he was doing and shifted his entire focus. He just had to figure out what was going on. And to do that, he designed one of the most famous experiments in the history of psychology.
Okay, so we started with something that meant absolutely nothing to the dogs. We call this a neutral stimulus. For his big experiment, he picked the sound of a bell. When he rang it, the dogs, well, they didn't do much. Why would they? It was just a random noise.
And this is where the genius part comes in. Pavlov asked a really simple but brilliant question. What would happen if he consistently rang that meaningless bell right before he gave the dogs something they really cared about, food? So this process that Pavlov uncovered isn't random at all. It follows a really clear blueprint, almost like a recipe with 4 key ingredients. If you understand these, you'll understand exactly how classical conditioning works.
First up, you have the unconditioned stimulus, or UCS. Now, unconditioned is just a fancy science word for unlearned or natural. It's the thing that causes an automatic reaction without anybody having to teach you. For the dogs, it's the food. Simple as that. And what does that natural thing cause? That's our next ingredient, the unconditioned response, or UCR. It's the reflex that just happens. A dog sees food, it drools. You hear a sudden loud bang, you jump. No learning needed. It's automatic.
Now this is where the real transformation happens. After Pavlov repeatedly paired the bell with the food, again and again and again, that bell wasn't neutral anymore. It became a conditioned stimulus, or CS. Conditioned just means learned. The bell now had a brand new meaning for those dogs.
And this brings us to the final piece of the puzzle, the conditioned response, or CR. This is the new learned reaction. The dog started salivating to the sound of the bell by itself, even when there was no food in sight. The association was officially locked in.
And what's great about this slide is how it just lays out the whole transformation so clearly. You can literally see it step by step. Before, the bell is just noise. During, the bell and food get linked together over and over. And then after, the bell alone has gained this new power to cause the reaction. That's the power of association right there.
But this whole learning process isn't just a simple on-off switch. There are actually some specific rules that control how these connections get made, how strong they become, and even how our brains can sometimes get them mixed up.
So on one hand, you've got something called generalization. This is when the learned response starts to spread to similar things. So maybe the dog starts drooling not just to Pavlov's bell, but also to a doorbell or a bicycle bell. But on the flip side, you have discrimination. That's the opposite. It's learning to respond only to one specific sound and ignore all the others.
The whole learning process kind of has its own life cycle too. Acquisition is that first phase where the connection is being built. But what happens if Pavlov keeps ringing the bell but stops bringing food? Well, eventually you get extinction. The response fades away. But here's the really weird part. After a break, that response can suddenly pop back up out of nowhere. That's called spontaneous recovery.
Okay, so bells, dogs, drool,
Why should any of us care about this stuff outside of a history book? Well, because these exact same principles are at work all around us, shaping our own lives every single day.
A really famous and, yeah, pretty controversial example is the Little Albert experiment. The psychologist John B. Watson showed just how powerfully our emotions can be conditioned. He took a baby who wasn't afraid of a white rat at all, and then paired the sight of the rat with a terrifyingly loud noise. It didn't take long for the rat itself, once a totally neutral object, to become a trigger for intense fear.
And once you start looking, you see this stuff everywhere. That catchy jingle that makes you feel good about a brand of soda, that's classical conditioning. That one food you can't even stand the smell of because you got sick after eating it once years ago, that's a conditioned aversion. It's even used in therapies to help people get over phobias by slowly building new, positive associations.
So the real takeaway here is this. From the ads you see to the feelings you get, your brain is constantly and quietly making these connections in the background. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? What hidden bells are ringing in your life, and what responses are they triggering without you even knowing it?